Thanks and welcome everyone. Firstly, great honour to have Prime Minister John Key join us to announce a very significant environmental partnership between our airline and the government today. I'd also like to welcome Minister of Conservation, Kate Wilkinson, Department of Conservation, Director General Al Morrison, his team from the Department of Conservation, members of the Air New Zealand Environmental Trust and some of our Air New Zealand Green Team members. You know, a few years ago I was in the UK and I was being interviewed by a journalist and she'd never been to New Zealand. She said to me, Rob, she said, I'd love to come to New Zealand, but I couldn't bring myself to fly all that way in a 747. It would be a bit like going to a Greenpeace rally in a Hummer. I spent the rest of the interview trying to convince her not to use that headline. But it did strike a chord with me, and it was a defining moment. I realised more than ever that Air New Zealand and New Zealand needed to take an environmental leadership position if we want to ensure New Zealand's economic prosperity, given our reliance on primary produce, tourism and agriculture. For Air New Zealand, we made a pragmatic decision to redeploy our resources away from the endless debate at the time about carbon taxes, carbon offsetting, Kyoto obligations and how all those were going to be divvied up across the community and across businesses. And instead, we decided to undertake a series of projects and initiatives that would actually make a real difference by reducing the impact of our operations on the environment, and projects that enhance New Zealand's fabulous natural environment and biodiversity. So the result of that, in the past 5 years, we've instigated more than 200 environmentally related projects. At an operational level, fuel savings initiatives see us save in excess of 142,000 tonnes of CO2 compared to what we were creating 5 years ago. That's the equivalent of 57 million litres less aviation fuel that we're using today versus 5 years ago. In parallel, we've supported many initiatives to protect and promote the natural environment and biodiversity in New Zealand, the South Pacific and Antarctica. Some of these projects currently include the planting of 120,000 trees at Mangarara Station in the Hawke's Bay, a 4-year sponsorship to help restore the magnificent Okarito wetland complex near Franz Josef Glacier, a 2-year sponsorship of the Motutapu Restoration Trust for the upgrade and expansion of the island's nursery to double the amount of reforestation to 8 hectares per annum, a sponsorship of a dozen schools through our Kids Restore New Zealand program to help get involved in local community environment projects, including the eradication of pests, planting of natives and monitoring of pollutants, support of environmental research in Antarctica, and the efforts. We've got a 3,000 strong employee green team that get deployed on projects around the country and throughout the South Pacific to help with environmental programs. So added to that, I'm pleased to announce today that Air New Zealand and the Department of Conservation have signed a major 3-year partnership to further enhance and promote New Zealand's unique natural environment. The partnership is worth the equivalent of $1 million annually to the Department of Conservation through travel and marketing support. And this will be reflected in Air New Zealand's direct support for new conservation programs around the Great Walks network around New Zealand, promotion of the walks globally and assistance with the translocation of endangered species around the country. These walks, as many of you will be aware, incorporate 9 of New Zealand's finest tracks, being Rakiura, Kepler, Milford, Rootburn, the Fyfe, the Abel Tasman Coast, the Whanganui River Journey, Tongariro and Lake Waikaremoana. The Great Walks Biodiversity Partnership will enable important conservation biodiversity projects to take place in the vicinity of these walks and also help promote these gems in New Zealand's natural tourism crown to domestic and international tourists like never before. Air New Zealand's marketing plan also includes the development of flight and hut packages and high-end group experiences on dock conservation land, promotion of the Great Walks through our million-strong frequent flyer database, and significant local and international marketing and social media activity. As part of this activity, I'm also pleased to announce that we will, in the next 2 months, launch a global competition called the Great Walker, giving one person from anywhere on the planet the opportunity to come to New Zealand and take on the challenge of completing all 9 Great Walks in 9 weeks. I think we've got a short video. We plan to launch the search through our significant global social media and marketing channels and have the winners share their experience through the same channels. It will be a real challenge for whoever wins the opportunity, but I'm sure we'll get plenty of attention and help promote the beautiful national parks to the world. Today's announcement is also good news for endangered species. The Department of Conservation undertakes approximately 200 transfers of wildlife each year, and the Air New Zealand translocation program will enable DOC to develop the program further as we seek to re-establish populations of various species around the country. In fact, just last week we flew 8 flightless kakapo from Invercargill to Auckland en route to their new sanctuary on Little Barrier Island.
So today we've removed 6 birds from Codfish Island, Whenuaho, just off the coast of Stewart Island, and the other 2 have come from Anchor Island in Dusky Sound. They seem to take travel in their stride. They're quite hardy birds and they have travelled many miles before. And today they're about to take a journey almost the length of the country, but we anticipate they should do really well. There's only 2 islands that are suitable for the long-term security of kakapo beyond the swimming distance of predators, and Little Barrier is one of them. Yes, kakapo have been to Little Barrier before. They were there for 17 years. Because it was an incredibly hard island to manage them intensively, which they required at the time, and there was also a rat eradication coming up.
You know, when I look at those two videos, I spend a lot of time travelling around the world and visit some spectacular places. I climbed Everest Base Camp last year. Earlier this year, I walked the Hollyford track, and I've just completed last week the Otago Rail Trail, and it reminds you the fabulous opportunities we have in New Zealand, how special this environment is, but at the same time the work we need to do to protect that environment, promote it to the world, but ensure that it's utilised and accessed in a way that preserves it for generations into the future. And I'm tremendously excited about our opportunity to work with Al Morrison and his team to make a difference for future generations. I'd now like to introduce the Prime Minister John Key to say a few words. Thank you.
Rob, thanks very much. Just before I begin, let me say that sometimes things surprise you, and the koru is known to pop up in places that you don't always expect. So yesterday when I was flying from Singapore down to Whanuapai on the Air Force jet, we landed at Darwin, and there was Air New Zealand 747 ferrying Australian troops, I might add, from Rockhampton, I think, around for some sort of exercise. So I went and wished them all the best for the World Cup in 3.5 years' time. But the other thing was I went up into the cockpit, and so if a picture, by any chance, of a new 747 captain happens to turn up on the Air New Zealand website, you know the background behind that. But like Rob, having spent a couple of weeks overseas and a fair bit of time overseas, you come back to New Zealand, it never ceases to amaze you how beautiful the place is, how great it is, and what a great proposition we've actually got for people that want to travel from around the world. And I think the really exciting thing today is it's a great example of a partnership between the government through the Department of Conservation and the private sector with Air New Zealand. And I think that's to the benefit both of the people of New Zealand and hopefully Air New Zealand. It's got to be a win-win on both sides. If we want people to come to New Zealand, then there's got to be things for them to do when they come here. And the walkways are a great example of that, and the promotional activity that's going to take place is a good way of encouraging them to come and enjoy that. I spent a little bit of time over Easter in Germany, and it was amazing the number of people I spoke to that wanted to come down both for the walkways and the cycleways. It's a market where they're really interested in coming to New Zealand and experiencing that. And certainly the work in terms of our endangered species are absolutely critical for the future of this country and for the New Zealand as we know it. From the government's point of view, we are very focused on economic growth, and the reason for that is that New Zealanders need to have jobs, and fundamentally they need to pay the bills and have places where their kids can grow up and have employment. But equally, in doing that, if we don't preserve the environment in New Zealand, then not only are we going to leave a future New Zealand in much worse shape than we inherited it and found it, but we're actually going to do a disservice to the country. And so the balancing act always for the government is how do you get economic growth and do so in such a way that you actually preserve the environment. And this is a great working example of that. So I want to congratulate Al and Department of Conservation, who I think over the last 3.5 years have really focused on how we can do partnerships together with various different elements of the private sector for the benefit of the environment, and also to ensure that a large number of people can get to access parts of the Department of Conservation estate which have historically been a bit off limits. And I think, again, that goes back to the proposition of it being a win-win. So thank you for what you're doing. Look forward to encouraging more of those tourists who want to come down to New Zealand and enjoy the very finest that we have on offer. And good on you for taking that environmental leadership. I think it's very important for New Zealand and for the future of the country. So look forward to be part of the signing very soon.
Thanks, Prime Minister, and I'd like to ask Conservation Minister Kate Wilkinson to come up and say a few words. A program like this has had a lot of challenges to get to this point. I think the Department of Conservation and ensuring the integrity of how they operate, working with a commercial organisation, ensuring that partnership can work, has compatibility and works in the best interests of both organisations is something we've thought long and hard about to get to this point. And in that context, if I could ask Kate to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and can I say it's just an absolute privilege to be here. Isn't it fantastic looking at a photo like that? I'm not sure about the Kiwi being flown by an eagle though, but it shows that we really do have the best country in the world and we have some stunning treasures. Prime Minister, I acknowledge you, Rob and Al. This is just to formalise this partnership between Air New Zealand and the Department of Conservation on behalf of the government is just such a special occasion for us. DOC is one of, if not the largest tourist provider in the country, and the efforts that you can go to, Rob, with your team and the Green team to help us to actually protect our conservation estate, but also show off our conservation estate and our country for being really the best country in the world. Actually, while I'm here, can I just thank you for all that you've done in the past for flying flightless birds often and other treasures from one part of the country to the other. It's probably the only way a Kiwi can actually fly, or a kakapo for that matter. Rob's already mentioned that the world's largest flightless parrot has just flown from one end of the country to the other, and that's thanks to Air New Zealand, and we really do appreciate that. So this partnership really formalises that arrangement, but it also adds other commitments in terms of both the national parks and the Great Walks, and can I just thank the Green team for what they're doing. But I think partnerships like this with business, with communities, with iwi, with volunteers, it just shows that we can do more conservation work with partnerships like this. The Department of Conservation can't do it by itself. We need all New Zealanders to take responsibility for conservation, and this just epitomises that. It also shows that conservation is good for business and business is good for conservation. So I really just want to thank you, Air New Zealand, and can I say, to use a pun, may our flightless birds and others continue to fly with Air New Zealand and continue to choose to fly Air New Zealand. Thank you.
This is actually our second most significant sponsorship after the All Blacks on the size and All right, thanks again everyone for coming along, and as I say, there's opportunity for one-on-one questions after the session. Thank you.